But we have a lot of people joining now the Abraham Accords, and hopefully we're going to get Saudi Arabia very soon.
Donald Trump has been singing an optimistic tune when it comes to USA's biggest Arab ally, Saudi Arabia. Since returning to office in January 2025, the U.S. president has repeatedly claimed that Riyadh would soon join the Abraham Accords and normalize ties with Israel. But it's no secret that the two nations have drifted apart in recent years. There are a number of reasons why Saudi-U.S. ties don't seem feasible for either party anymore. The reasons span from oil diplomacy, diversifying interests, and diminishing U.S. influence in the Middle East.
That the Saudis are not going to move toward normalization with Israel because they have nothing to gain.
In this episode of HT in Depth, we examine the reasons which led to a drift between Saudi Arabia and the USA, just as Donald Trump prepares to host Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for the first time in his second term. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia established ties in 1933, and the relationship grew into a formal economic and defense partnership over the next few decades. America was one of the biggest buyers of Saudi oil in exchange for military support for the Middle East's biggest monarchy. Despite occasional hiccups in the 1970s and 1980s, the U.S.-Saudi friendship managed to remain afloat. But come the 21st century, the gaps began to widen. It started with the 9/11 revelation. About 15 of the 19 hijackers involved in the attack were Saudi nationals. The 9/11 Commission cleared Saudi Arabia of any blame, however. A U.S. law still allows victims of the terror attack to sue foreign states directly. The U.S. war on terror caused further dips in ties, and eventually, a major bone of contention became the 2018 Khashoggi murder. In 2018, Saudi citizen Jamal Khashoggi was murdered in Saudi Arabia's Istanbul consulate. Khashoggi, a U.S. resident and journalist, was a notable dissident and critic of Mohammed bin Salman. While Khashoggi was murdered by a group of Saudi operatives, Riyadh denied any official involvement in the assassination. In 2021, a declassified U.S. intelligence report pinned the blame on MBS. The report said, and I quote, "We assess that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved an operation in Istanbul to capture or kill Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi." The report was released under Joe Biden's presidency after being held back under Donald Trump despite a law requiring its release. Notably, Trump had reaffirmed his support for MBS when Khashoggi was killed. In his first term, Trump also failed to act against the Crown Prince, even as the Senate adopted a resolution holding MBS responsible for the murder. However, Joe Biden flipped the narrative. During his 2019 presidential campaign, Biden vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state for killing Khashoggi. Biden even refused to meet or talk with MBS when he first assumed the top post. Until 2022, Biden and MBS met in Riyadh as the shadows of Khashoggi's murder threatened to darken U.S.-Saudi ties. Interestingly, Biden had directly flown in from Israel, another thorn in the U.S.-Saudi relationship.
Peace in the Middle East, 3,000 years. They've never had peace in the Middle East. We're going to have it, too. We're doing well. Just keeps going along. And we just had a meeting. It's even more and more so. And so many people in this room are very much into Israel and the Middle East. And it's been amazing what we've been able to do. And you've done such a big part of it, along with a very special young genius named Jared Kushner, who helped you so much. Stand up, Jared. And he's the father of the Abraham Accords, right? He's the father of the Abraham Accords. But we have a lot of people joining now the Abraham Accords, and hopefully we're going to get Saudi Arabia very soon. But I'm not saying that. I'm not lobbying. No, but we have a lot of people. We have a lot of people that are coming aboard. You know, the key was when we took out the nuclear capability of Iran, all of a sudden everybody said, wow, that was nice. They've been wanting to do that for 20 years.
Since getting the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco to sign on the Abraham Accords, Donald Trump has been pushing for the Saudis to join the pact. However, Saudi has a list of demands before it formally sits with Israel at the same table. Riyadh's first and foremost condition is the establishment of a Palestinian state. While the majority of the world's nations have moved to recognize a Palestinian state, the U.S. and Israel remain firm about their refusal to do the same. With Israel denying the Palestinians their own state, Riyadh sees no immediate benefit of agreeing to Trump's Abraham Accords proposal.
The Saudis are not going to move toward normalization with Israel, at least for a while, partly because of Gaza and partly because they have nothing to gain from doing that, except maybe the favor of Donald Trump.
The Americans and the Saudis have had a symbiotic relationship for decades. Washington bought Saudi oil in exchange for military support to the Arab giant. Riyadh sought military backing to protect itself from threats in the region, particularly its nemesis Iran. Iran and Saudi Arabia have had a fraught relationship, with both being engaged in proxy struggles backing Shia and Sunni militias. The Saudi-led war in Yemen also pitted Iran's proxy Houthis against Riyadh, turning it into one of the biggest humanitarian crises in years. Iran's nuclear program was also a point of contention for Riyadh, with Israel being the only other Middle East nation to purportedly possess nuclear weapons. However, with the decline of Iran's defense prowess in the past few years, the Saudis don't perceive Tehran to be as big a threat. But there is a new adversary that the Arabs are becoming more wary of. Israel's direct strike on Hamas members in Doha in September 2025 shook the Arabs to the core. The attack also raised questions of the region's sole dependency on the U.S. Following the attack, the U.S. strengthened its alliance with Qatar, turning it into a NATO-style defense agreement. However, Riyadh still lags behind in this regard with the U.S. Instead, MBS has turned to Pakistan and China to deepen Saudi's military cooperation. In September 2025, Riyadh and Islamabad announced a new defense agreement, wherein the two nations agreed that any attack on either country would be considered an act of aggression against both. Pakistan Defense Minister Khawaja Asif even proclaimed that Islamabad would be extending its nuclear umbrella to Riyadh without elaborating further.
The Arab states are likely to pursue other security arrangements with other countries, buying weapons from other non-US weapons, perhaps striking more bilateral defense pacts within the region, as we saw between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, because it would be absolutely foolish from their standpoint, irrational for them to put all of their eggs in the American security basket.
Despite a defense alliance, the U.S. has kept Saudi Arabia at bay, perhaps in a bid to protect the interests of Israel, its other major ally in the Middle East. Washington has been reluctant about giving F-35 fighter jets to Riyadh, making Israel the only Middle East nation to operate the advanced military planes. Bridled with such reluctance, MBS has sought support from America's biggest Asian foe. China and Saudi ties have been expanding rapidly, with Riyadh purchasing Chinese ballistic missiles and air defense systems. China has also invested in a local missile production facility in Saudi Arabia, while the two nations' militaries have been conducting regular drills. The U.S. is no longer the biggest importer of Saudi oil. It does buy oil from Riyadh. However, it is only sent to a refinery owned by the Saudis. So, essentially, MBS exports oil to the U.S. only to be refined for future use. Meanwhile, since the shale revolution in the late 2000s, the U.S. has been producing and exporting its own oil rather than being dependent on any other nation. This has led to a decline in Saudi's purchases, who turn to other alternatives to sell their energy. Like defense, China entered the fray to buy Saudi energy. Beijing has also endorsed MBS Vision 2030, which seeks to diversify Riyadh's economy, promote local defense production, among other things. Saudi's Vision 2030 aligns itself with Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, leading to a deepening of Riyadh-Beijing's relationship. Over the past years, Saudi Arabia has diversified its interests and forged relationships with countries that are not the U.S. After nearly a century of friendship, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia stand at a crossroads, with differences in their defense agreements being at the forefront. Donald Trump and Mohammed bin Salman's November 18th meeting will be a litmus test to determine the future of this relationship. Will the two nations sign a defense pact that could draw Riyadh back into the U.S. sphere of influence? Will MBS agree to join the Abraham Accords? A wish Trump has been harboring, or will this decades-long relationship fizzle out amid the rapidly changing dynamics in the Middle East?